should have known something was off when my date started analyzing my posture over dinner. But I didn't expect him to be that kind of mankind who already knew my darkest secret before I even ordered dessert. It was supposed to be just another blind date, one that my best friend insisted on setting up because, as he put it, "You've been single since Obama's first term." So there I was, sitting in a candlelit restaurant in downtown Manhattan, nervously stirring my wine and waiting for a man named Eli. When he walked in, time did that stupid thing it does in movies: it slowed down. Eli wasn't just handsome. He was serene, like a man who had seen storms but learned to stand in the rain. His suit was simple, gray, unpretentious, yet somehow made him look like he carried the entire weight of someone's emotions, and maybe he did. We talked. Or rather, he talked, and I listened, because every word from him sounded like an answer to a question I hadn't yet asked. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I realized the truth. Eli was my foster son's psychiatrist. I met Noah 3 years ago when I started volunteering at a youth shelter in Brooklyn. He was 15 then, a quiet kid with eyes that avoided the world like it might break him just by looking. I didn't plan to be a parent. Hell, I could barely take care of myself. But one night, when Noah's caseworker said he'd be moved again, something inside me broke. I signed the papers. Since then, I've been learning how to be a dad in the most trial-by-fire kind of way. Burnt pancakes, missed therapy sessions, late-night breakdowns. And through all that, there was one name that kept coming up in Noah's progress reports: Dr. Eli Hayes. So when I found out that my charming, intelligent, heartbreakingly gentle date was that Dr. Hayes, my world tilted off its axis. The next time I saw him wasn't in a restaurant, it was in his office, sitting across from him as he talked to Noah. The office was all warm tones and soft lighting, a space built for comfort. But as soon as our eyes met, the air turned heavy, almost claustrophobic. He froze just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of recognition, the same confusion I felt. Then, in his calm, professional tone, he said, "Mr. Miller, thank you for bringing Noah today." Mr. Miller, not Ethan. Not the guy who kissed me outside a jazz bar 2 nights ago. That's when I realized we'd both just stepped into something dangerously complicated. That night, I sat on my couch, watching the city lights blink through my window, a glass of whiskey untouched in my hand. Noah was asleep in his room, and I could hear the faint hum of his white noise machine, the same one Eli had recommended. My phone buzzed. "Eli, we should talk." For a long time, I didn't respond. My heart wanted to, but my head screamed no. Because whatever this was, whatever we were becoming, wasn't supposed to happen. But against every rational thought, I typed back, "Me. Tomorrow." We met at a small cafe near Central Park. The same quiet gentleness hung around him. But this time, there was something else too. Guilt. "I didn't know," he said, his voice low. "When I met you, I had no idea Noah was your foster son. I'd never crossed that line intentionally." "I know," I said softly. "But now we do know." He looked at me with those tired, beautiful eyes. "So what do we do?" I wanted to say we forget it happened. That would have been the right thing, the clean thing. But instead, I said, "We wait." For what? I didn't know. For time to pass? For boundaries to fade? For the ache to stop? Weeks turned into months. Our lives continued in careful parallel, trying to help Noah navigate his nightmares. Eli trying to guide him through them professionally. We never spoke about that night again, but every session, every accidental glance, every silent moment screamed of what we were holding back. And then, one afternoon, everything unraveled. Noah had a panic attack during school. He called me, sobbing, begging me to come. When I arrived, Eli was already there, kneeling beside him, his calm voice anchoring Noah through the storm. I watched him, the way his hands stayed steady, the way he whispered reassurance with the patience of someone who had seen brokenness and still believed in healing. When Noah finally fell asleep, Eli stepped outside. I followed. "You're good with him," I said. He smiled faintly. "He's a strong kid. He just needs time." "So do we," I whispered before I could stop myself. He looked at me for a long, silent moment. The wind carried the smell of rain and city air. And then, quietly, he said, Maybe we've had enough time. We kissed in the hospital parking lot that night. Not desperate, not wild, just real. It was a kiss that carried every moment we tried to bury, every second of restraint, every quiet confession we'd left unsaid. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was breaking a rule. I felt like I was finding home. But of course, the world doesn't let you have peace for long. A week later, Noah found out. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, then at Eli. His face was a storm of betrayal, confusion, hurt. "You're supposed to be my dad," he said quietly. "And you," he turned to Eli, "you're supposed to help me." Not he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That night, he packed a bag and left. I spent 3 days looking for him. Police reports, phone calls, messages unanswered. Every second was an eternity. And then, on the 4th night, Eli called. "They found him," he said, his voice breaking. "He's safe." We met at a small hospital in Queens. Noah was asleep when I got there, bruised from exhaustion, but safe. Eli stood by the window, eyes rimmed with red. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be. I should have known better. I crossed a line I can't uncross." And in that moment, I realized love wasn't just about wanting someone, it was about knowing when to let them go. I took a step forward, but he didn't move. The silence between us was heavy, final. "Take care of him," Eli said softly. "He needs you." Then he walked away. The days after Eli left were a kind of quiet I'd never known before. Not peaceful, not calm, just hollow. Noah barely spoke to me. The house felt like a museum of silence, filled with ghosts of words we didn't say. His footsteps down the hall were soft, cautious, like he didn't want to disturb the air between us. Every morning, I'd hear the sound of his door opening, the faint creak of wood, and I'd pretend I wasn't waiting for it. Pretend I wasn't listening for any sign that maybe, just maybe, things would go back to how they were before. But they didn't. He avoided me at breakfast. He avoided me after school. He avoided the world, really, and I couldn't blame him. How could he trust me again, when I'd blurred the one line that mattered most? It was a Wednesday when the first message came. "Eli, how's Noah doing?" I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Me, he's trying. We both are." There was a pause, then Eli, "I'm glad. You're doing the right thing, Ethan. Just keep being there for him." No signature, no warmth. Just quiet professionalism, the tone of a man who had built walls so tall, even his own feelings couldn't climb out anymore. Still, I read that message over and over again like some pathetic ritual, because it was the only piece of him I had left. Months passed. New York turned from gold to gray, autumn leaves giving way to snow-dusted sidewalks. Christmas lights blinked in windows, families laughed in cafes, and I tried to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. Noah started seeing a new psychiatrist, someone recommended by the foster care agency. Dr. Peter's kind, older, fatherly in a way that made it impossible to hate him. He never mentioned Eli, and I was grateful. But sometimes, when Noah came home from a session, his eyes looked distant, like something still lingered unresolved. One night, I found him sitting in the living room, scrolling through old photos on his phone. There was one of us at Coney Island, him holding a melting ice cream cone, both of us laughing like idiots. He looked up when he noticed me. "Do you still talk to him?" he asked quietly. The question hit like a punch. "No," I said too fast. Then, softer, "Not really." He nodded, eyes returning to the phone. "Good." But his voice trembled just enough for me to wonder if that was what he really meant. Winter deepened. I threw myself into work, freelance photography gigs, event shoots, anything that kept me busy and away from my thoughts. But somehow, every corner of this city reminded me of him. The coffee shop where he first smiled at me. The park bench where we shared stories about our families. The jazz bar where he kissed me for the first time, soft, hesitant, like he was afraid the world might collapse if he went too far. Maybe it did. One night in February, I got a call from an unknown number. "Ethan Miller?" a woman's voice asked. "This is St. Vincent's Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for Dr. Eli Hayes. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I didn't even remember moving, just the blur of lights outside the taxi window, the echo of sirens somewhere far away, my hands shaking around my phone. When I got there, Eli was lying in a hospital bed, pale but awake. A car accident, they said. Someone ran a red light. Nothing fatal, just bruises. A minor concussion. A few stitches above his brow. Still, seeing him there, hooked up to IVs, broke something inside me I thought I'd already lost. He blinked when he saw me. You came. I shouldn't have, I whispered. But you put me down as your contact? He smiled faintly. Old habit, I guess. For hours we just sat there, the hum of hospital machines filling the space between us. He looked fragile in a way I'd never seen before, his hands trembling slightly, his voice weaker than I remembered. But his eyes were the same, gentle, sad, full of everything he couldn't say. You shouldn't be here, he murmured. It's complicated. I know. He looked at me for a long time. You still care. Of course I do. A silence stretched between us, long and trembling. Then, quietly, I said, Noah misses you. His expression faltered. He shouldn't. But he does. Eli turned away, staring out the window. Snowflakes brushed against the glass, melting before they could settle. I broke his trust. Yours too. Maybe, I said. But you also helped him heal. That doesn't just vanish. He laughed softly, almost bitterly. You always make me sound better than I am. Maybe that's love, I said before I could stop myself. The room went still. Eli closed his eyes, taking a slow breath. You can't keep doing this, Ethan. You can't keep waiting for something that's never going to be simple. Maybe I don't need simple, I said. He opened his eyes then, and for a moment, everything we'd lost felt possible again. When he was discharged a few days later, I offered to drive him home. He didn't protest. The ride was quiet, but not the kind of silence that hurt. Just soft, familiar, almost peaceful. He lived in a small apartment on the Upper West Side, neat, minimalist, too quiet for someone with as much heart as him. When he reached for the door handle, I said, Eli, wait. He turned. I leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't like the first time. It wasn't tentative or cautious. It was slow and certain, the kind of kiss that says, I know this is wrong, but I can't help it. When I pulled back, he was breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. I can't lose you again, I said. He closed his eyes. Then don't. That night, for the first time in almost a year, I stayed. We talked until sunrise about Noah, about guilt, about what it means to forgive yourself for loving someone you shouldn't. He told me about his childhood in Vermont, how his father left when he was 8, how he promised himself he'd never abandon anyone like that. And then he looked at me and said, That's why it hurt so much when I walked away. I reached for his hand. You did what you thought was right. Doesn't make it hurt less. For a while, it was enough just to exist like the tin, the quiet, in the in-between, knowing the world outside would judge us but refusing to care. But we both knew it couldn't last. Because love, when it's built on broken rules, always comes with consequences. 2 weeks later, Noah found out again. He came home early from school one afternoon and saw Eli sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee. The silence that followed was unbearable. Noah's face went blank, then cold. So this is happening again. Eli stood, calm but trembling. Noah, don't, Noah snapped. You're supposed to help people, not mess them up more. I tried to step in. Noah, please, he turned to me, tears brimming. You don't get it, do you? I trusted him. I trusted you. You were supposed to be my family. Now it's like I don't even know who either of you are. Then he left again. This time it took only a few hours to find him. He was sitting on a bench near the East River, knees pulled to his chest, watching the water shimmer under the city lights. I sat beside him, not saying a word at first. The night was cold, the air sharp, the river reflecting 1,000 stories we'd never tell. Finally, he said, I hate that I can't hate you. My throat tightened. You don't have to forgive me now. He laughed bitterly. You always think forgiveness is the goal. Sometimes, it's just about surviving the hurt. I swallowed hard. You're right. We sat there for a long time. Then, in a voice so small it almost disappeared into the wind, he said, "Does he make you happy?" The question startled me. "Yes," I said honestly. "He does." Noah nodded slowly. Then, "Don't screw it up again." When we got home that night, Eli was waiting on the porch. Noah walked up to him, looked him straight in the eye and said, "You hurt me, but I think you hurt yourself more. Don't do it again." Then he went inside. Eli turned to me, tears shining in his eyes. "He's braver than both of us." "Yeah," I said softly. "He really is." From that night on, things began to heal, not all at once, not easily, but piece by piece. Eli didn't become Noah's doctor again. That part of their story was done. But he became something else, someone who showed up for birthdays, for late-night talks, for the small, quiet moments that build a family out of broken pieces. And somehow, amidst the noise of the city and the mess of our hearts, we found peace. It wasn't the kind of love story people write about in magazines. There were no grand gestures, no perfect endings. Just three people learning how to be human again. Some nights, when the city is quiet and the world feels small, I still think about that first date. The way Eli smiled when he told me I seemed defensive. How I laughed, telling him he should stop analyzing people on dates. Maybe he didn't stop. Maybe he was analyzing me all along. But maybe that's how he found the one thing he didn't expect: someone who saw him, not as a doctor, not as a healer, but as a man just trying to love and be loved. And for the first time, that was enough. Spring arrived quietly that year, like the city itself had decided we'd earned a softer season. Cherry blossoms bloomed in Central Park. The air smelled of rain and fresh beginnings. And for the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel like a battlefield. Noah laughed more often now. Not always loudly, not without ghosts still haunting the corners of his smile, but enough to remind me that healing didn't have to be perfect to be real. Eli came around, sometimes never too much, never too little, just enough. He'd help Noah with college essays, stay for dinner, then leave before midnight. It was slow, delicate, fragile. We were rebuilding something none of us had words for. One Sunday morning, we went to a small farmer's market by the river. Noah wandered off to look at vinyl records while Eli and I browsed the fruit stands. He picked up an apple, turning it thoughtfully in his hand. "You know," he said, "it's strange. I used to think healing meant erasing pain. Now I think it's just learning to live alongside it." I smiled. "Maybe that's love too." He glanced at me, sunlight catching the soft curve of his smile. "You always have to make everything sound romantic, don't you? Only when it's true." He laughed. That quiet, gentle sound that had once undone me still did. Later that evening, we walked Noah to a subway station. He was spending the weekend with friends in Queens, his first overnight trip in months. Watching him go was like watching a bird test its wings again. After the train doors closed, I stood there for a moment, feeling a strange ache in my chest. Pride, fear, love all tangled together. Eli slipped his hand into mine. "He's going to be okay." I nodded. "Yeah, maybe we all are." That night, I cooked dinner at Eli's place for the first time since everything happened. It wasn't fancy, just pasta, a cheap bottle of red wine, and the quiet warmth of two people who had run out of excuses to stay apart. He sat at the counter watching me. "You've gotten better at this," he said, smiling. "At cooking, at staying." I looked at him, surprised. I wasn't aware I'd ever left. He tilted his head. "Maybe not physically, but for a while, I think both of us were scared to stay in one place too long." I stirred the sauce in silence, letting his words settle. "You're right. I think I was afraid of happiness. Every time it showed up, I waited for it to disappear." Eli stood and came behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Then maybe it's time we stop waiting." We ate in the soft glow of his kitchen, music humming low in the background, rain brushing against the windows. For the first time, there were no shadows between us. No roles, no guilt, no boundaries drawn in invisible ink. Just two men who had already lost enough to understand the value of what they'd found. After dinner, he reached across the table, his hand finding mine. "Ethan," he said softly, "do you ever think we were meant to meet this way?" I smiled. If fate wanted to mess with us, it sure took its sweet time. He laughed. "I don't believe in fate." "Then what do you believe in?" He looked at me, eyes warm, steady. "In choices. In people who choose each other, even when it's hard." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Later, in the quiet of his apartment, he pulled me close, and everything that had been broken found a way to fit again. It wasn't passionate in the movie kind of way, it was real. Slow, hesitant, tender. The kind of love that happens when two souls stop running. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the window, painting golden lines across his sheets. I woke to find Eli reading on the couch, glasses perched on his nose, hair tousled. He looked up, smiled. "You snore." I groaned. "You're a liar." He laughed, shaking his head. "You do." Quietly, like a guilty secret. I threw a pillow at him. It missed. He caught it effortlessly and tossed it back, hitting me square in the face. And for the first time in years, I laughed unrestrained, full-bodied, unguarded. He joined in, and it echoed through the apartment like a song we hadn't realized we'd forgotten. But life, as always, wasn't done testing us. A week later, Noah came home early from school, holding an envelope. "Got something for you," he said, handing it to Eli. Eli frowned. "What is it?" "College recommendation form," Noah said, trying to sound casual. "They want letters from people who've influenced me." Eli froze, visibly caught off guard. "Noah, it's okay," Noah said, smiling faintly. "You can just write about the doctor part, not the other stuff." Eli blinked, a soft laugh breaking through his surprise. "You're sure?" "Yeah. Besides," Noah added, "you're part of my story whether I like it or not." That moment changed everything. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a speech. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It was real, quiet acceptance. And maybe that was enough. Over the next few months, the three of us built something strange and beautiful, a life that didn't fit any rulebook but somehow worked. Eli and I moved slowly. We didn't hide, but we didn't flaunt either. We took Noah to Mets games, Sunday brunches, stupid road trips to upstate New York. He teased us constantly, rolling his eyes whenever we bickered about directions or playlists. But sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him smiling like he finally believed we'd all found a way to stay. The night before Noah left for college, he came into my room. He was taller now, older in the way that time makes boys into men. "Hey," he said, standing awkwardly by the door. "I just wanted to say, thanks for not giving up on me." I felt my throat tighten. "You make it sound like I had a choice." He grinned. "You didn't." Then, after a pause, he added, "And I'm glad you and Eli figured it out. You both deserve to be happy." Before I could answer, he hugged me tight, fierce, like he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. When he pulled away, there were tears in both our eyes. The next morning, Eli drove him to campus. We helped him unpack, met his roommate, laughed over the chaos of dorm life. When it was time to go, Noah stood between us, looking suddenly small again. "Don't cry, old man," he said to me. "I'm not crying," I lied. Eli smiled. "We're proud of you." Noah looked at him, and for the first time said, "Thanks, Eli." It wasn't doctor. It wasn't sir. It was just Eli. And that single word felt like a lifetime of healing. The drive home was quiet. The city stretched ahead of us, familiar and endless. Eli reached over, took my hand, and held it the whole way back. When we reached a red light, he turned to me. "You know, when I met you, I thought you were a disaster." "I was." He laughed softly. "You still are. But somehow you're my disaster." I smirked. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." He grinned. "I try." Years later, I would look back on that day, the sunlight through the windshield, his hand in mine. The city humming around and realized it was the moment everything finally settled. We didn't need grand gestures. We didn't need a perfect story. We just needed to keep choosing each other. And we did. 5 years passed. Noah graduated college with honors, majoring in psychology because, as he put it, someone's got to fix people without falling in love with them. Eli nearly choked on his coffee when he said that. We built a small life in the city, full of routines and quiet joys. Morning runs in Central Park. Movie nights that turned into sleepy conversations. Birthdays spent around a kitchen table that always felt too small for how full our hearts were. Sometimes, when I'd catch Eli watching me with that soft, steady gaze, I'd think about the night everything began, two strangers meeting in a restaurant, neither knowing they were about to break and rebuild each other completely. One evening, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found the business card Eli had given me that first night. Dr. Elijah Hayes, Psychiatrist. Below it, in faded ink, a handwritten note. You seem like someone who carries too much alone. I smiled, tucking it back into the drawer. Because he'd been right. I had, until him. Years later, when people asked how we met, we'd laugh and say, at dinner. We never mentioned the chaos, the heartbreak, the rules we broke to get here. Because those things didn't define us, they refined us. Eli used to say love wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. About waking up every day and choosing to stay, even when it's hard. And somehow that's exactly what we did. One night, long after the city had gone quiet, I stood by the window, watching the skyline shimmer under 1,000 scattered lights. Eli came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. Still awake? He murmured against my shoulder. Couldn't sleep. Thinking too much again? Always. He kissed the back of my neck, his breath warm. Then think about this, we made it. I turned to face him, smiling. Yeah, we did. And as I looked at him, this man who once felt like a forbidden dream, now standing here as my home, I realized that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the gentlest places. Outside, New York pulsed with life. The same city where it all began, the pain, the mistakes, the redemption still roared beyond our window. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because after all the storms, all the nights we thought we'd lost everything, we were still here, still choosing, still holding on. And that, I decided, was the truest kind of love. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.